fight fans, I'm Sarah Davis, and you're watching Fight News Now, the post-UFC 154 edition. We have so much in store for you coming up on this show. Post-fight interviews straight from the Bell Center in Montreal. We have John Ramdine and Robin Black recapping all the fights and the incredible comeback of George St-Pierre. We're also bringing you the post-fight press conference from the Bell Center. And before we get to that, it's going to be a little while, we cannot wait to talk about the comeback of George St-Pierre, that incredible brawl. So John and Robin, take it away.
Amazing job done, not just by the champion George St-Pierre, but an amazing job done by both of these warriors. I did not expect this type of fight. We knew that Carlos Condit was going to come forward. We knew that he was going to come after George St-Pierre for 5 rounds. It was a bloody back and forth battle. George St-Pierre proving that he is at the top of the UFC's welterweight division for a reason. This guy is one of the pound-for-pound greats. He's just simply amazing, and every time he steps inside of that octagon, Robin, he gets better.
Mon Dieu, you know, like, can you say that on television? This was just a phenomenal fight. Like you said, it wasn't just GSP doing what he does. He even looked better than he generally looks, but it was Carlos Condit's show of heart and grit and desire, and that desire to win. And when you see two athletes who want it as bad as these two guys did, it reminds you what we love about the sport. It's not just violence, it's human drama.
I don't want to take anything away from the performance of the French-Canadian George St-Pierre, but you definitely have to commend Carlos Condit because he came under a lot of criticism in that last fight against Nick Diaz, taking home the decision where a lot of people felt that he ran. So people did criticize this guy. I think he erased all of that with his performance. Even though it was a losing effort, he proved to be a star in the welterweight division. George St-Pierre, little shout out there saying that Carlos Condit was his toughest opponent to date, and you could see why. Even off of his back, slamming those elbows into the champion's face in that 3rd round had him very hurt. Actually, it's the most hurt I think we've seen George St-Pierre in recent memory.
For sure. And you know, with some of these greats, these true greats, Anderson Silva, GSP, Aldo Dos Santos, sometimes the opponent comes in and they're afraid to fight him. Like the old Mike Tyson syndrome. You're afraid to get in there and let it hang out. Carlos Condit came to win. You saw it on the walkout. You saw it on the week leading up to it. In his mind, he was going to beat George St-Pierre. And a man like that is incredibly dangerous, and he showed it tonight. What a beautiful contest.
When you assess their skill set, of course, George St-Pierre, known for his wrestling skills, and he did revert back to that because Carlos Condit is simply too dangerous not to do that too. But what impressed me most about George, it was his movement in this fight. He was able to tag Carlos Condit. He was able to really mix it up. He threw a lot of head kicks, a lot of kicks to the body, and I think he surprised Carlos Condit in this fight.
For sure. Again, if we're going to compare him to some of the other greats, with Anderson Silva, you know you got to worry about that stand-up. With Dos Santos, it's the big punch. With George St-Pierre, right now, yes, he's got the wrestling, but he hung with Condit on the feet, who's a killer on the feet, and on the mat, he looks spectacular. He's truly the most well-rounded athlete we've ever seen in the UFC.
I have to agree, and in the post-fight interview with Joe Rogan, St-Pierre said, yes, ring rust did affect his performance. He said he didn't expect the crowd to overwhelm him. He didn't expect, you know, the mat to overwhelm him. Why do you think that is?
You know, it's just one of those things. Watching from the couch, being an armchair quarterback, having a couple of beers and some chicken wings and watching that and screaming at the TV, that doesn't give you any insight into it. That moment, the heat of the lights, the sound of the crowd, the pressure as your heart jumps up into your throat, that's what these guys deal with. This isn't a team sport. You can't throw the football to another guy. You stand in there with another man and you trade punches on the chin in front of millions watching on television. That kind of pressure, you can't fake in the gym. You can't learn, you can't buy, you have to deal with. Tonight, George dealt with it.
You used the word pressure, and it was all about pressure for George St-Pierre. He knew that Carlos Condit is the type of fighter that always attacks. So I love the fact that he pressured Carlos Condit when he forced the fight down to the ground. When he had to, he tried to pass the guard. Carlos Condit was able to re-guard constantly in this fight, but George St-Pierre was not fazed. He still tried to crush that leg, tried to stay on top, tried to do damage, very reminiscent of the old George St-Pierre, the GSP that this large casual fan base rallied behind, and it's one of the reasons why he's the biggest star in the world because of these type of performances. Do you think we're going to get this from George moving forward?
Yeah, you nailed it, brother. I mean, when you look at him, there was the knock against him over the last while up until that knee injury was that he fought safe. He fought like a madman tonight. He dealt with it in the pocket. He stood in there and traded with a natural-born killer. On the ground, he hung where he had to hang. He was in all kinds of trouble. In some ways, some fighters, some uneducated fighters might look at that performance and go, hey man, you can hurt George, you can hit him with a kick, you can deal with him in certain ways. But a real educated fighter sees this is a guy who is dangerous in every situation. And all Condit really did was make small incremental gains, hurt George, and George took him back and hurt him worse. And really, you just can't overstate how virtuoso-like, I don't know the word, but it was badass.
It is the strike that you don't see that hurts the most, and in that third round, Carlos Condit landed that high kick to the head of George St-Pierre, pounced. Were you concerned at all that this could have been the end of George St-Pierre?
Yeah, you know, we're in an office full of fight fans, and we got all the camera guys, all the editing people, all these educated fighters, and we're freaking out. But when we looked at the replay, you saw George's eyes never left Carlos Condit. He got wobbled, he hit the ground, the eyes were still there, and he was still in that fight. It was a big test. But that man was in it, and he was focused all the way through. And Condit attacked, and that was his moment, and he knew it. But man, he hung in there till the end.
I love the fact that also we saw George on his back. Very few times do we see this from the current welterweight champion over the course of his career. But Carlos Condit, again, tried to inflict as much damage. But we heard Joe Rogan say, when you have that wrestling base and you're able to revert back to it, it can save you. And it saved him in this case.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. It's just the sport changes so rapidly. The skills that guys use, the evolution of these tools. And in George's case, working from his back, you know, we saw it earlier in the night and we saw it from Condit. There's some very familiar arm bars and triangles and attacks and sweeps that guys use. But George converts to a wrestling move the second he creates space, goes in for a single and turns it into a wrestling match. The guy, you just can't talk enough about that performance tonight.
Condit wasn't waiting for opportunities. He was trying to create opportunities. He was trying to take advantage of anything, any mistake, as small as it may be, that George would do, and he would try to take advantage of that. Prime example is when George was going for the can opener. He kept trying to go for that arm lock. Is there anything that he could have done differently? We heard Kai Otera, his jiu-jitsu coach, saying, no more going to the ground. Keep this fight standing and strike with him. And if your jiu-jitsu coach is saying, avoid the ground, you could be in trouble.
Yeah, and again, that is more credit to Condit's heart and will, because you're right. You look into that corner, and the man who has prepared you for this area of war is telling you, we don't want to be hanging out here with this man. This man is beating us here. And you still turn back and you fight all the way through. That's impressive. I mean, we're going to spend some time looking at this fight, and the pundits and the experts are going to break this down. But the truth is, George St-Pierre maybe changed the game in the welterweight division tonight. And I mean, on the co-main event, we saw another breakthrough that, you know, the welterweight division, you look, and Hendricks, right after that knockout, must have been thinking, man, I want George St-Pierre, I want the winner of this. But you be careful what you wish for.
Of course, we're going to get to the co-main event in 1 second. Of course, going into this fight, it's almost like UFC President Dana White. It was almost a given that George St-Pierre was going to win, because they were talking about the fact that if George St-Pierre retains his welterweight championship or becomes the undisputed welterweight champion of the world, Anderson Silva was going to come in and he was going to challenge George St-Pierre. But of course, George didn't get out of this fight unscathed, of course. He was beaten, he was battered, but he walked away the victor. There is no need to see a fight with Anderson Silva, especially after the performance that Johnny Hendricks had, knocking out one of the most dangerous men in the welterweight division in Carlos Condit. On top of that, you have a guy like Rory McDonald, you have BJ Penn still in the mix, you have so many guys in the welterweight division, John Fitch, Damian Maia, Nick Diaz. We don't need to see the fight with Anderson Silva right now.
Everything you say is true, John Ramdeen, but I really want to see that fight anyways.
Anderson Silva, of course, didn't come into the cage like expected. George St-Pierre said that, he says he needs some time off, and that is the reality of things. George St-Pierre needs to take a vacation. He needs to reassess things. And what do you think is going to happen? Do you think that he's going to look at the welterweight division and say, you know, I think there's better challenges for me, there are big money fights here? Or does he risk his legacy and go up and fight Anderson Silva, whether it be a catchweight bout or a bout at 185 pounds?
Well, we're still on a rush from this fight, and so is George right now. You know, we're still on a high from seeing this great performance. What George did when he looked at that camera and said, I don't know, I got to take some time off, that's really spending a little time being able to negotiate to make real money to fight the biggest fight in the world. I'm sure he's open to it. For the right money, those guys will fight.
Sarah, I'm sure you were happy with this main event. You were rooting for George. It was very exciting. It was simply amazing.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, Dana White did say if George wins, we will see this super fight. Dana White wants it in May, right?
Not going to happen.
Okay, well, the Spider didn't get into the cage either to call out George St-Pierre, but Anderson did address the media about the super fight prior to the card tonight, and here's what he had to say.
I have my plans, my personal plans in Brazil for my new school, for my family, but Dana talked to me for coming to here for watching the fight, the George St-Pierre and Carlos Condit. Maybe have the super fight, maybe in Brazil, maybe here, but I'm talking to people all the time. I'm here for working for UFC. Dana talked to me, hey, I need your help. You're coming to Canada for watching the fight, and maybe you go for the super fight, you and George. Okay, I go. George have the good jiu-jitsu, have good grappling, and good stand-up. But I have more time inside the octagon. For a long time, the people talked, hey, Anderson and George St-Pierre, Anderson, George St-Pierre. This time, the people talked Anderson and John Jones, Anderson and John Jones. My first goal is the George St-Pierre's fight, the super fight. And the second goal, maybe John Jones, I don't know. This is not my decision, this is Dana's decision. No, I have 2 more fights in my contract, but my plans is maybe have the super 2 fights. 1 fight George, I don't know, maybe I put my belt for Chris Weidel, or I don't know. But my big goal is staying together with UFC for the rest of my life. I work to Brazil and for UFC in Brazil, I don't know.
So that was Anderson Silva before UFC 154. Now George St-Pierre has won. And we are waiting to hear from him from the post-fight press conference. And we have a lot more interviews to bring you. So make sure you stay with us here on Fight News Now after the break. Welcome back to Fight News Now. This is our post-UFC 154 edition, and we are recapping all the fights and waiting for the post-fight press conference from the Bell Center. As you can see, there's the podium. Nobody there yet, but they'll be there soon, so not to worry. Before we get to that post-fight press conference, we want to talk about the co-main event between Martin Kampmann and Johnny Hendricks. And guys, Johnny Hendricks with a 46-second knockout. First round, amazing, very reminiscent of his John Fitch knockout.
Johnny Hendricks is the real deal, and he is going to be a very dangerous opponent if they ever match him up against George St-Pierre. I think stylistically, he matches up very well, considering that wrestling background, 3-time national champion coming out of Oklahoma State, one of the best wrestling schools in the NCAA wrestling world. So I think Johnny Hendricks has a good opportunity if the UFC gives him that fight with George St-Pierre. But I do have a feeling he is a couple victories away. Maybe just doesn't have the name value of a guy like Nick Diaz or Carlos Condit that we saw tonight. But for Martin Kampmann, unfortunately, getting knocked out less than a minute into this fight shoots him way down the welterweight rankings. And you'd have to imagine, in order for him to even be considered in the title picture, he needs at least 3 big victories.
Hey man, take nothing away from Johnny Hendricks. I mean, that's the real thing. When you can hit a guy with 1 shot like that, turn his lights off, and put him down in a prone position on the ground, looking up at the stars, wondering what's going on. That's real power, and that's a real thing. At the same time, the fan in me says, wow, what a great performance, and the business analyst looks and says, yeah, you can sell that fight. You just show those 2 knockouts, and we're all buying it. But the true analyst in me says, there's no way this guy can hang with George St-Pierre. When he's talking in his post-fight interview about the fact he throws a lunging right hook to a straight left hand for the knockout. Beautiful knockout. But when he's talking about it in his post-fight interview, how he just put that combination together last week, that is just too rudimentary in his evolution to be able to deal with a monster like George St-Pierre. You can flip a coin, and 1 out of 10 of those times, he will knock George out. But George will just have such a game plan to deal with that penetrating offense, and he can deal with the wrestling. You know, it would be fun to see it. You could definitely sell it, but I can't see him beating GSP.
In Johnny Hendricks' last 2 fights, he was scheduled to go 30 minutes, 3 5-minute rounds in one fight, 3 5-minute rounds in the next fight. He only spent less than 1 minute in those 2 fights. Could that be something that we look at in the fact that, you know, he hasn't been in there in deep waters against top-level guys because he's knocking them out before they get a chance to take him into the second or third round?
For sure. I mean, Carlos Condit tonight proved what type of gutsy, driven, heart-filled warrior he was. We haven't seen that from Johnny Hendricks, and we may never see that. We may never get that opportunity if he knocks guys like that. And that's a great problem for Johnny Hendricks to have. But, you know, he still needs a while. We are now talking, we're going to digest this over the next couple of days, but George St-Pierre is one of the greatest of all time. Johnny Hendricks has had a couple of beautiful knockouts. And, hey, padding his bank account, looking good, making his family happy, turning on the fans, but he's not at GSP's level.
This fight, very reminiscent of other Martin Kampmann fights. Of course, he doesn't normally get knocked out in less than a minute in any of these fights. But he's the type of fighter that needs to get hit before he really starts putting things together. And sometimes it's to his detriment. And tonight we saw that.
Yeah, and we were talking about this matchup over the last week or so, and that's the beautiful thing, my brother, to be able to come in here and break these fights down in the week coming up, and then to put it all together tonight is we can look and see how they stack up and really get in and break it down. And we were looking at the fact that Kampmann gets hit a lot. And when you get hit a lot, no matter how good you are and how big your heart is and how driven you are, you get hit a lot. And there's a guy who can knock guys out with 1 punch. That's a bad combination. And it was a rough night for Kampmann, and it was a rough matchup.
But you can understand Martin Kampmann. He is the more technically proficient stand-up fighter. That is without question. He's coached by Ray Sefo of K1 fame, who has outstanding kickboxing skills. Johnny Hendricks isn't the type of guy that has a technically sound striking game. A lot of wild punches, a lot of overhand punches. So for Martin Kampmann, I'm sure he thought, you know what, I'm going to be able to see these punches. I'm going to be able to move my head and counter-strike Johnny Hendricks and try to batter this guy. Are you going to take him out with 1 or 2 punches? No, but you could hurt him, and you can swarm him and possibly get the TKO, or hurt him and try to go for a submission like we've seen Martin Kampmann do in the past many times. What was the biggest mistake for Martin Kampmann tonight?
Well, it started with exactly what you said. You know, he sat there and he thought, you know, I can take a punch or 2, and he was wrong. You cannot take shots from true power punchers. You put yourself in a position to get knocked out. And to be in there and play this lackadaisical game against a guy who's proven to have the ability to drive in like a linebacker, to drive in like a running back, and go in and drill a guy in the face, that strategy was the wrong strategy. He needed lateral movement. But, you know, the reason we love Kampmann is because he's one of these guys who ends up bloodied and torn up and finds a way to win. Just wasn't his night.
Martin Kampmann, Robin, I know he's going to come back stronger than ever. This is a guy that learns from all of his performances. And Sarah, even though he lost tonight, I know Martin Kampmann's going to come forward. He's going to put forth exciting performances because that's the type of fighter he is. And he's not going to stop until he gets that crack at the welterweight title. You
know what I loved about that fight was the end when Hendricks was like, oh man, that combo just came to me in a dream a week ago. Like, you talk about his boxing skills. All right, thanks, guys. Stay with us here on Fight News Now. After the break, we have more interviews from the Bell Center in Montreal, and we're also going to bring you the post-fight press conference from UFC 154, where we'll hear from George St-Pierre and Carlos Condit. You're watching our special edition of Fight News Now, where we are recapping UFC 154, bringing you interviews from the Bell Center in Montreal, and we have the post-fight press conference coming up in just a little while. Before we take you there, we're going to hear from Francis Carmont after he defeated... Oh, and there's the podium. You can see the media's gathering. We're just waiting for the fighters to come out, and of course, Dana White. We always love to hear what he has to say. So before we get to that post-fight presser, we want to hear what Francis Carmont had to say post-fight after his split decision win over Tom Lawler.
All right, Francis, wasn't pretty. You got the W. At the end of the fight, did you feel you had done enough to get the judge's decision? How did you feel before the scores were read?
Sure, for me, I win this fight because I win the first and the last one. But it's not. I don't make the fight I want because I want to make a good fight or a sitting fight. But it's not simple when you have a opponent. You make the same game in the wrestling. You must to defend the takedown, and it's difficult. But Tom Lawler, it's a hard opponent, and the essential is to win this fight.
What were some of the problems that a Tom Lawler presented to you that you really focused on in camp?
It's a very, very good good wrestler. You have a hard power, a good guillotine choke, and I must to impose my game, and it's not easy.
My last question is just he secured a guillotine on you twice. Were you in danger at either time at the end of the first or second?
No, because I worked the escape with my coach on. I know Tom Lawler have a good guillotine choke, and I am escape, and that's good.
Clearly, at the beginning of the fight, the crowd was rooting for you, and the Montreal fans have adopted you as their own. At the end, there was some boos. Did that affect you in any way? Did it disappoint you?
No, it's not disappointing. You know what? When the people want to see a exciting fight, and if he don't see what he wants, it's normally to make that he do, but it's not my fault. It's the fault. To make a good fight, you need two good fighter. And Tom Lawler, it's a hard matchup, and he makes his fight. I make my fight, and that's it.
Is there an aspect of your game you want to work on a bit more for your next fight?
I just want to go to the gym and not to speak to the next fight.
Francis Carmont defeats Tom Lawler by split decision, and that's what he had to say post-fight. Now back over to our panel, John Ramdeen and Robin Black. Carmont, he's a training partner of George St-Pierre. Did you see anything in his fight that was similar to St-Pierre's technique?
Well, I mean, number one, athletically, I think that's one of the reasons why George likes working with this guy is because he is a different level of athlete. But I mean, when you look at this fight, I mean, even UFC President Dana White tweeted out that nobody won this fight. Not maybe the most exciting fight. Francis Carmont came in with, big expectations, but he was facing the toughest guy of his career. Tom Lawler is not going down without a fight. He is going to be a very difficult challenge for anybody at 185 pounds. And again, do you agree with the decision?
It was very, very close. I mean, if it went either way, you weren't going to stand up and scream at your TV and spit your popcorn out. It was a very, very close fight. I was almost more impressed with Lawler because he's against a bigger, more powerful, more genetically gifted, more evolved athlete than him, and he was the driver in that fight. He was the one going after it, and it was a very impressive performance, I thought, by Lawler. And if we look at Carmont, at the same time, you have to sort of look at the good parts. If you go back next week, and after Faraz, I don't know if he drinks alcohol, but if he does, after the hangover from the party of George winning and so many of his guys performing well, you look at Carmont, and you look at the good things, and that takedown defense looked fantastic. And, he was tough in the wrestling. He did well against the fence. But the hole or the weakness in his evolution is he's just not pulling that trigger. This guy's incredibly gifted, and he's just not going after it yet.
When you look at the range, and I think that's what a lot of people expected. They expected Carmont to use that distance to try to score on Lawler from the outside, use his athleticism, try to explode in. I don't know if people expected him to throw a lot of kicks because I'm sure people anticipated that Lawler would try to catch a leg and force this fight down to the ground. But Carmont did a great job of avoiding a lot of takedowns. He could have been on his back a lot more than he was in this fight, and it proves his evolution.
For sure. And I mean, the TriStar Gym, we've talked a lot about it this week, and we're going to continue to talk a lot about it after this great performance by a lot of their fighters. But, you know, one of the key things is in their training camp, they go in and they spar hard once a week. But then a couple other times the pros get together, and one of the drills they do is you got a guy on the fence and you got a guy on you, and for an hour you're defending takedowns. And you could see in Carmont how well that has grown in him as he defended Lawler's takedown attempts so well and so consistently. And that pulling the trigger problem is a good problem to have if you're winning. And he is winning. So as he stacks up those wins, doesn't get hurt, doesn't get injured, keeps evolving, all of a sudden one fight you can break through and be the limitless killer they suggest you're going to be. So really, no complaints for Carmont or his camp.
Mixed martial arts continues to evolve. We saw guys that got into the sport as just willing guys that put the time in the gym and they gave it inside of the ring or cage. Now we're seeing a new evolution. The day of the athlete, Francis Carmont, George St-Pierre, and so many others. And when you look at a guy like Tom Lawler, maybe not as big as some of the other guys at 185 pounds, is it time for some of these guys that could go down to 170 pounds, or guys that could go down to 155 pounds from welterweight, is it time for them to step it up and say, you know what, I have to fight wherever my trainer and my nutritionist and my training partners feel that I'm the best?
Hey man, everything in 2012, 2013 evolves super fast. Our technology evolves super fast. Everything does. And the MMA is changing as if the time of those leather helmets in football to right now is 2 years. That's how fast it changes. And if you're not at the best camps and you don't have the best nutritionists and the best trainers and the best elite guys who are working on your body and your mind and technique and strategy, you're going to be left behind. And you were seeing it. Guys like Carmont are evolving so fast.
Francis Carmont, Sarah, of course, he's so athletic. He is gifted. It is the biggest victory of his career, but a win over Tom Lawler really essentially still keeps him in limbo in the 185-pound division.
Yeah, he's still got a ways to go, but he does come from the TriStar Gym, one of the best in the world, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
So, all right. Okay, thanks, guys. You do not want to miss what we have coming up next. It's the post-fight press conference for UFC 154 from the Bell Center in Montreal. So make sure you stick with us after this quick break on Fight News Now. Welcome back to Fight News Now. This is the edition where we are recapping UFC 154. And we actually have John Pollock standing by at the Bell Center in Montreal with Rafael dos Anjos, who defeated Mark Bocek by unanimous decision this evening.
Here with UFC lightweight Rafael dos Anjos victorious tonight over Mark Bocek. And Rafael, first of all, tell us about just performing in front of the Montreal crowd. You were coming here against the Canadian and Mark Bocek. Rattle you at all? Tell us a bit about just the atmosphere performing at the Bell Center tonight.
Yeah, I know that he is a good wrestling, so I've been improving a lot of my wrestling skills. So I've been training a lot of since I signed the fight against him. I've been working a lot of my takedown defense, and I got this, and I defend all his takedowns, and I'm very happy today.
It was incredible, your performance, just shutting down Mark. Tell us just a bit about what your corner was telling you in between rounds, and were you surprised at Mark's game plan?
Yeah, I watched Manny's previous fight I watched his previous fight, and he always come with the same combination, 2 jabs and straight, and he go right on the legs, try put down on the double leg against the cage. He has a solid game against the cage, so I've been working a lot over this, and I got all defense, all takedown defense. I'm so happy.
Did you sense kind of your confidence growing as the fight progressed, and conversely, Mark kind of getting more kind of turned off at this point as the fight progressed? You could see a lot of frustration in that fight on his part, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think he got many times try putting me down, and he got a little frustrated. So, and then I got confidence. That's right. I got the unanimous decision.
In the UFC lightweight division, it's probably the deepest in the sport. A victory very instrumental for you in terms of moving up the 155-pound ladder. Just tell us a bit about the importance of this win over such a respected grappler in Mark Bocek.
Yeah, I'm also Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, so this year 2012 was perfect for me. So I got 3 wins this year, So I think I'm on a good way for this belt.
Congratulations on the victory, and hope you enjoy the rest of your stay here in Canada.
Thank you.
So that was Rafael Dos Anjos, who defeated Mark Bocek by unanimous decision. Back over to our MMA panel. And guys, were you impressed by Dos Anjos' performance?
Oh yeah, I think it was the breakthrough performance of the night. I mean, we were talking going into this fight about how Mark Bocek could have a breakout performance if he can put it on Dos Anjos, break this guy, and I think he could be inserted into the title picture. Well, Dos Anjos took advantage of that, and I think his name is now in the hat. Excellent performance by this guy.
Yeah, an MMA expert is kind of like a weatherman. You know, we called for snow and we got a bit of a desert because it was literally the opposite. And we're talking about Bocek because he is so incredibly skilled. This is a guy with phenomenal grappling and phenomenal wrestling, and but Dos Anjos kind of drew attention to it there. What he found was he was able to analyze what Bocek does on that entry with his stand-up to enter in, put him on the fence, and get him to the ground. And it was by exploiting that he kind of negated Bocek's strengths. Very wise game planning, very smart research, and Bocek's got to go back to the drawing board. He showed his heart and his guts, and he showed how mentally incredibly tough he is. We've seen it a million times, but now it wasn't the wrestling and the grappling that he got stifled on. It was the entry, and it's the striking that he's got to develop.
Dos Anjos clearly knew what type of challenge Mark Bocek was. He knew with a victory over the Canadian, again, he could, get some higher profile fights. And I think, yes, we all knew about his jiu-jitsu. We knew about his striking. Yes, he impressed with the wrestling. But I have to look at some of the things that you can control in such a short period of time, and that is his conditioning. He looked phenomenal, fresh through all 3 rounds. Even at the end of that fight, he was able to do things, that you wouldn't expect somebody late in a 3rd round to do. He's, some high kicks and just really pushing the pace on Mark Bocek. I don't know if Bocek was ever broken in this fight, but you can't break Bocek, but he was definitely battered, and you could see him wilting. He fought hard to try to get the takedowns. They were never there, and I think that was the difference in this fight, because clearly that was Bocek's plan, to do what he normally does. And why wouldn't it be his plan? Because if you're successful, go with it. We saw it with George St-Pierre tonight, and like you mentioned, the double jab to the overhand right, put him up against the cage, get the takedown, look for the ground and pound, or look to submit. It didn't work out that way.
Yeah, I was just talking about evolution, and using that double jab to enter was ahead of the curve for a lot of guys, only 6 months ago. Guys will work a 1-2, or guys work a very simple things, and a double jab on the entry was working for Bocek because it was slightly ahead of the evolution of some other guys. Well, now Dos Anjos has evolved past him rapidly. Mark has to keep evolving on the feet, but like you said, you cannot break this guy, and definitely your point is great. Dos Anjos, his real weapon in this was his unbelievable conditioning.
Obviously, in mixed martial arts, Robin, we know about having games. Game plan A, game plan B, game plan C. You have to have a game plan Z if it comes down to it. For Mark Bocek, it didn't seem like he had a plan B.
That's because plan A has worked consistently for Bocek. Even against the lightweight champion of the world, it kind of almost worked. He could believe, hey, I can make this work against anybody. Maybe I lost that fight against Henderson, but I was close enough that if I just tweak game plan A, it'll always work. And he learned tonight.
Bocek, he was beating up Sarah, but I know he's going to come back stronger. He's one of those driven guys, and I think he's going to probably work on his speed, and that's, if he gets his speed up, I think it'll be a game changer.
And he's got to stick with the Red Dragon moniker,
yeah,
right?
That's
we love that. We love that. We love Mark Bocek. We're biased. We're Canadian, so come on. Okay, so still to come, the fighters from the main card are going to be taking to the podium at the post-fight press conference at the Bell Center in Montreal for UFC 154. So stay with us after the break, because that's coming up soon. Welcome back to Fight News Now. This is the special post-UFC 154 edition. Now we're taking you over to the Bell Center in Montreal, where the post-fight press conference has just gotten underway.
Oh, Dana, back here. There were obviously a lot of Canadians on the card tonight. No one had their back against the wall more than Mark Hominick. With a loss tonight, can we expect to see Mark returning to the UFC after tonight?
You know what? Hominick always comes to fight. That was a really good fight. They both went at it, and I love that kid. So you know, we don't ever make decisions like that here at the press conference, but, you know, I have a lot of respect for him, and he always brings it.
And one quick other one, too. Tonight with Patrick Coté, it seemed like a great argument in favor of instant replay. Do you feel that this is a bit of a statement towards maybe we can see this in other states? Because was this not kind of towards Quebec, they were allowed to go to this right away, whereas Nevada, California wouldn't be in that situation?
Yeah, no, I do respect that. I do like the fact that they pull the trigger and they make a decision one way or the other. And don't take me wrong, I'm not knocking them for what they did. I just said normally I think that would be a no contest. But I like commissions that get in there and pull the trigger, you know, because that was a horrible job by the. It's mind-boggling how he could sit there and stand there and watch that many punches go to the back of somebody's head. It's crazy.
Question pour Georges. Georges, d'abord bravo pour la victoire.
Merci.
Après 19 mois d'absence, c'était plus difficile ou plus facile que vous pensiez de revenir dans notre tournoi?
He says after 19 months out of the octagon, it was harder or easier than I thought. Je croyais que c'était pas difficile, puis c'était très difficile. C'est un feeling que tu oublies, puis tu le perds. Alors j'étais très nerveux, mon timing, ça m'a pris quelques temps avant de le prendre. I said I knew it was going to be hard, and it was very hard, especially in the beginning. It's a feeling, the octagon feel, it's something that you lost after a certain time. And but Carlos, I haven't fought for a long time too, so we were both in a similar situation. And yeah, but I knew I was ready for it. I made a lot of visualization, and I was ready for a tough fight.
Sorry, I didn't want to cut off George. I wanted to ask something to Ivan before we get back to George. Good fight for you. We know it's been a great story for a few years here in Montreal, and now another big night for you. And for a guy, I didn't realize it was $70K for the submission of the night, but for a guy like you who has another job, feels pretty good, eh?
Thank you. It's fun, you know. Fighting is amazing, and make a little more money is help a lot for the family, education, and thanks.
Georges, tu sembles assez amoché. Est-ce que c'est le combat le plus difficile de ta carrière? Est-ce que tu as été autant amoché déjà par le passé?
He says I'm pretty messed up. So is that the hardest fight of your career? And it's hard to say. I think je crois que c'est un des combats les plus difficiles de ma carrière. Ce combat-là est celui de John Fitch. This fight and John Fitch fight was two fights that I was really pushed to the edge, and but this fight, it was a little bit special too because I haven't been there for a long time, and it was at home. I think this fight was something very special for me because it was in Montreal and the whole story behind it. I think this fight was. Je crois que ce combat-là c'était vraiment spécial pour moi. C'était le combat peut-être un des combats les plus difficiles pour moi par rapport à que j'étais absent pendant 19 mois et je faisais un retour.
Est-ce que tu as l'impression que tu as été assez convaincant, tu as fait taire certaines critiques? Là, on sait que tu n'as pas encore réussi à finir ton adversaire avant la limite, mais est-ce que tu crois que c'était une victoire assez convaincante pour ton retour?
He talked about the criticism. He says if I'm happy of my fight regarding the criticism. Je suis content de mon combat. J'ai tout donné ce que j'avais. Je suis allé sans regret. Alors, il faut donner crédit à Carlos Condit. Là. Je me bats pas contre n'importe qui. Je me bats contre le meilleur au monde. I'm happy. I give everything I had. You know, I live everything I had in the octagon. I was exhausted. We say in French is an expression. My cornerman was yelling at me, put him in red. Like in red, that's mean like give everything you have every round. So you come back, you're exhausted. And that's what I did. I give everything I had. I have no regret. I fought the best I could, and I have to give Carlos the credit because he's number one guy. You know, so I give Carlos the credit. You know, people sometimes they forget I'm fighting the best guy in the world. You know, so they say, oh, the finish, but the finish, you know, it's not always easy. And
regarding the credit, I give everything I had. I have no regret. I give everything. I fought for my fan. I left everything out there, and I had fun. I had a blast tonight.
Il y a on parle beaucoup d'un éventuel combat contre Anderson Silva, mais Monsieur Hendricks ici a fait le KO de la soirée. Tu l'as peut-être pas vu, mais l'idée de te battre contre Johnny Hendricks, est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui t'intéresserait?
You talk about a fight. People talk about Anderson Silva, but now Johnny Hendricks has an expeditive KO tonight. What do I think about that? Je crois que je viens juste de finir mon combat. Là, j'étais un peu, j'ai reçu des coups en plus. J'ai besoin d'avoir quelques vacances. Et puis, il y a tellement d'options. Il y a Johnny Hendricks, je sais qu'il y a Nick Diaz, il y a Anderson Silva. On va voir ce qui va arriver. J'ai besoin de parler au patron et on va voir. I said I need to see what's going to happen. I need to talk to the boss right here, and we'll see what's going to happen, the best option. And, you know, I just get hit. I need some vacation before I took a decision quick as this. But, of course, John Hendricks looked very impressive tonight, and with this victory, probably he put himself in #1 spot. We'll see what's going to happen.
Georges?
Nick Diaz says on Twitter apparently he's not impressed by my performance. Nick Diaz. moi j'étais pas. J'ai mieux fait que Nick Diaz en fait. Alors I said I did better than Nick did against Carlos, but it was a tough fight. You know, it could have gone either way at some point. I was in big trouble and I gave everything I had. Donné tout ce que j'avais.
Confiance pour l'avenir, le retour.
Oui, ça me donne. It gave me a lot of. You said did it give you a lot of confidence? Oui, ça me donne beaucoup de confiance. Puis j'ai retrouvé le feu, j'ai retrouvé l'amour que j'avais perdu pour le sport, et puis que ma nouvelle routine, j'ai du plaisir à nouveau. I said I found the fire back. I had a lot of fun. This time in the octagon, I had a blast tonight. I was getting hit. It was painful, but I had a lot of fun, and I love my job, and thanks to everyone for the support. I don't care the critic, what they say. I fought. I give everything I had tonight, and you know, I am like I am. I use my body the best as I can. I don't have the knockout power of a Rampage Jackson. I don't have maybe the athletic ability of a John Jones. I don't have the accuracy of a Anderson Silva, or I don't have the wrestling of a Charles Sonnen, but I use my body with the tools I have the best as I can, and that's why I win fight. It's not always about the muscle, it's the mind, and I use my tools the best I can to win the fight and to fight for the fan and to make a good show. So.
Did either of you miss having Greg Jackson in your corners, and did it affect your performance tonight?
I missed having George, or I'm sorry, I missed having Greg in my camp, like pretty much the whole time. You know, he is a big part of my camp and my preparation. So, you know, it'll be nice the next fight, not fighting another, you know, a guy who's you know affiliated with the team, and you know back to normal with Greg Jackson, you know, back to coaching duties.
Yeah, it's Greg. He's a plus for us, you know. But and for that fight, it was neutral for me because you take away Greg for me, take away Greg for Carlos. So mentally, it didn't do anything for me. For me, it was a fair thing. But of course, if I would have, you know, it's a plus. You know, Greg is a very smart coach. You know, he's very good tactician. But now he wasn't there. So if I miss him, yeah, of course I miss him. I miss Greg. But you know, it's not like we cannot talk, you know, like I can call him right now, hey Greg, how are you? You know, he's there, but it's just we didn't talk about fighting and we didn't talk about, you know, that's it, you know.
Question for George. George, a lot of times when an athlete comes back from a major surgery, you know, the most difficult part could be the mental part. Was there any time during that fight that you thought about your knee?
I did not talk about my knee. I just, when you have been fought for a long time, you forgot the feel of the octagon, the suffering, you know, this feeling of not giving up. And it's sometime in the fight, I was like, oh my God, I I wanted to, you know, I was like mentally, not breaking mentally, but you have to push, and this is something I haven't felt for a long time. Something very special you have in training, but it's not quite the same. You cannot, you have to fight in the octagon to understand that. I cannot really explain. It's something very special that the feel of the octagon, the light, the heat of the light, the crowd, the ground, the feeling of it. It's something that if you haven't done it for a long time, it can be good in training, but if you haven't done it for a long time, it's gonna affect you. And it did affect me a little bit, and you know, it is what it is.
If the
Hold on.
George,
Who's got the mic? You asking another question? Go ahead.
one more, George. If the super fight with Anderson Silva does happen, at what weight would you like to fight him at?
I don't know right now. It's a good question. I know Anderson have fought late 20s at 168. I don't know what he walk around. I know he's a pretty big guy, but you know, he's an amazing guy. You know, he went up in weight class. Me personally, is my weight. I cannot drop and go up like that. I can't do that with my body. Some guy, they can play with their weight more easy than me. Me, I cannot go up and go down too much, you know. So maybe we need to talk about that. I don't know how he can come down, but you know, at 170, I fight everybody at 170. But the thing is, it's pissed me off a little bit is I haven't even came back yet. I'm fighting Carlos Condit, you know, and everybody talk to me about Anderson Silva, you know. This is disrespectful for me, because disrespectful for my opponent, you know. And I think we give more credit to the challenger that I have, you know. Is that guy, they're the best in the world, you know, and I need to focus on my opponent and not thinking about the next step, you know. And right now, I just finished my fight. It's the same answer I'm going to say. I need to recompose and think about it. I get hit a lot on the head. I need a break and think about it, you know. We'll see. The thing is 177, okay, I show up 177, then the night of the fight I'm 185, then him he's maybe 205, 210, and I don't know how big he is. He's maybe 225, 230, you know. He's a big guy, you know, he's a very big guy. And I don't know how much he can come down. I used to fight, not a long time ago, used to fight in Japan at 168, which is smaller weight class than me, you know. Who knows? You know, sometime I'm sure UFC they can make magic thing happening, you know. So we'll see what's gonna happen, you know. I don't know how he can go down and up, you know. Me, I have a hard time It's my body. I'm an ectomorph body type, you know. I have very hard time going up and down. Some guy they can go up more and down. I don't know how they do. I'm not like that. I have a very hard time.
So that's the end of the post-fight press conference with Dana White and his crew. Of course, George St-Pierre, now the undisputed welterweight champion. Now stay with us after this break, because John and Robin still have more to talk about, and we have some more post-fight interviews for you. You're watching the post-UFC 154 edition of Fight News Now. And down at the Bell Center, we have John Pollock standing by with Pablo Garza, who defeated Mark Hominick by unanimous decision.
You said the game plan was to stand and trade with him after the first round. Did you somewhat alter that? Because once you were able to get on top of him, you were just controlling him throughout the second and third round.
Yeah. We had it in the back of our minds that if we get the takedown and if I'm on top, he wasn't going to get up. I wasn't going to let him up, regardless if I was in his guard. Little do people know, Hominick actually has underrated ground game. His ground game is pretty good. So I was content staying in his guard and giving him elbows and stuff. But it was definitely something that we worked on. I thought he was going to tap, and apparently not. I had it on tight, and then he stood up, so I tried stretching my head to balance on my head to make myself even longer, but when I felt it slipping out, I was like, all right, whatever, I'm just going to bail on it and get up. Like I said, the game plan was to bear the brunt of the storm for the first round and then exploit his ground game the second round, being that I wanted to get him used to, like, all right, there's going to be a kickboxing match. But it was some people might think it's foolish, really stupid. Other people might look at my game plan like, wow, that was actually pretty smart because, I mean, let's face it, you don't want to stand toe-to-toe with Mark Hominick because, well, like you saw, he dropped me with a body shot. So.
How did you just the actual environment coming in here to Montreal, enemy territory, so to speak, against Mark? How did you react to this very lively crowd at the Bell Center?
Well, I love Canada, man. Last time I was in Canada, I got my flying triangle. Canada loved me. Canada didn't love me so much when I came to weigh in, but underneath my shirt, I was wearing a Canadiens jersey, so it went from boo to whoa. So when I came out, it was just, I mean, I just wanted to win the crowd over, you know. I love Canada. I want Canada to like me too, especially that I fought my hero, you know, and I wanted to show them that I was worthy enough to be a fighter for them, you know.
So Pablo Garza defeats Mark Hominick by unanimous decision at UFC 154. And back over to our panel. Guys, this is Mark's 4th loss in a row. Where does he go from here?
Yeah, well, UFC President Dana White says that Mark Hominick always comes to fight, and he always puts on exciting fights. So hopefully Mark Hominick stays put in the UFC. Maybe he has to change a couple of things, but the fact is that this guy helped build mixed martial arts in Canada. He helped pioneer the sport before there really was a sport. So our hats off to Mark Hominick. I'm sure he's going to stick around, but if he decides to hang up the gloves, I don't think anybody's going to blame him.
Yeah, man, I don't know. Like, you know, whatever Dana White says is kind of irrelevant to me at this point. Like, this is the 3rd out of 4 fights that we have seen, one with a giant melanoma, the other one, you know, the last 2 fights him beat up. He gets these opportunities to show the incredible heart, what kind of human being he is, how much drive he has. But man, you know, between cuts and bruises and hematomas and digging deep like that, I don't want to keep seeing that out of Mark Hominick. I want to see the Mark Hominick who makes people miss and explodes and damages them. I don't want to see a bloodied Mark Hominick because that's a tough way to make a living. He's about to have his 2nd child. I mean, he's got to change something. He's got to go back to moving his head, moving his feet, and finding a way to win without having to dig that deep every single night.
Obviously, the camp has just simply not been the same since the passing of Sean Tompkins, their longtime coach and head leader. So I think Mark Hominick just has to change a couple of things. But, you know, he's secure where he lives and he has his family there, but I think a smart move is to change camps. I know he's training with Jeff Curran, but maybe you want to train with the best in the world in George St-Pierre. We know his teammate Chris Horodecki has done that. We know Sam Stout is training with Mark Delagrati in Boston. So if Mark Hominick, I think, wants to be successful at this stage and compete at the highest level, I really think he has to change some things. But Mark Hominick, just a class act in every sense of the word.
I hope he takes a break and he comes back and he does what he's got to do because he's one of the greatest fighters in Canadian history. He's one of the greatest people you're ever going to meet. And this man is truly a machine in every way. I hope he comes back even stronger.
You guys got that right, and they still have more fights to break down. We have more interviews to get to after the fallout of UFC 154, so don't you dare change the channel for Fight News Now, the post-UFC 154 edition. Welcome back to Fight News Now. Just before the break, we brought you the post-fight press conference for UFC at 154. Someone we have not heard from yet, Patrick Coté, who earned a win tonight by disqualification against Alessio Sakara, who there were some bad punches to the back of the head. So we want to hear what Patrick Coté had to say about that, and he's with John Pollock at the Bell Center.
Patrick, how are you feeling after that finish? You took uncountable shots to the back of the head, but how do you feel right now? You seem to be...
I saw that after. Unfortunately, for sure, you know, I didn't want this fight end like that, you know, especially in front of my hometown, you know, here I'm fighting home. I wanted to give the best fight as possible. I think the first minute of the fight was pretty fun, you know, pretty intense. I rocked him, he rocked me. But after that, you know, there's rules in this sport for a reason. It's to protect the fighters. And, you know, I'm just happy that this thing turned pretty well. I'm healthy. I don't have any serious injury. But that's the first time, I know I've never been wrecked in my life. Now I know how you feel when you're dizzy.
What was going on during the post-fight? Was it just completely chaotic? Were you of the assumption that you had lost this fight?
I didn't know, seriously. I didn't know. My cornerman was yelling their head off, you know, just I was saying to the referee to check the big screen, and after that I saw the big screen. I was okay. I thought maybe 1 or 2, but that was like 6, 7, 8. I was like, okay, damn, okay, that's a lot. But you know what? At the end of the night, you know, at the end, I was there to give a good show. I tried, but you know the situation is pretty shitty now.
Do you have any concern about a possible concussion? You seem to be okay right now, but is that something you're going to get checked out, or?
But like I said, it's new for me, this feeling. You know, I've never been rocked in my life, never been knocked out in my life, and for the first time I feel dizzy after a punch. But that was an illegal one. But you know, I didn't pass out. You know, I was always there, but I was feeling dizzy. So yeah, it rocked me with those punches behind my head. I don't think I have a concussion, but anyway, I have a 60 days suspension. So I'll see what's going on the next few days. But right now, I feel pretty good.
All right, so Patrick Coté winning by a disqualification, right, guys? Yeah. He talked about never being rocked before, and there he was getting rocked by illegal punches to the back of the head. What does this mean for him? Where does he go from here?
Well, number one, we heard him say that he would love to see a rematch with Alessio Sakara, and I think go with it. If you have the storyline, you have some interest there, and I think obviously there's some unfinished business here. Alessio Sakara, they were blatant illegal shots, but Patrick Coté, like so many other fighters, they don't want to win this way. They don't want to win by a disqualification, because this is kind of the payoff. You're going through this right now, 10 weeks of hard training. You want to go in there and get the job done. You want to punch, you want to kick, you want to wrestle. You want to leave it all inside the cage, and unfortunately for Patrick Coté, he was robbed of that opportunity tonight.
Yeah, and I mean, to some degree, Alessio Sakara was as well. I mean, this is a violent sport. It's a contact sport. There's injuries in football. There's injuries in baseball. There's injuries in cheerleading. It's really surprising when you put this game together that there's not more smash and blast and that kind of, you know, things that hit in weird ways. You get hit in the cup, you get hit in the back of the head. Really, the rule that makes the back of the head, it is a 2-inch strip up the back, through the head, and headphones on the side. That's all that's considered the back of the head. So when the referee, Dan Mergliotta, was calling it, some of the shots in behind the ear are legal. Then there's an illegal one, and Mergliotta might be, hey, what's up there? And then the legal ones and the illegal. So it's a lot harder to really do than Dana, you know, gave Dan Mergliotta credit for, and I don't think it was on purpose. It's just an unfortunate part of the game.
I had a chance to talk to Big John McCarthy, UFC referee, and he said this is a three-dimensional sport. When you have guys rolling around, you're trying to target one part, but they're moving, and sometimes you hit the back of the head. It's all part of the game, and of course, Alessio Sakara isn't known for being a dirty fighter. He got caught up in the moment, and I think he just got excited about rocking Coté, hitting him with that elbow, and it was illegal punches all the way down. It was unfortunate, but I think the UFC's responsibility is to make the rematch.
Yeah, I like that, guys. Okay, thank you. Stay with us on Fight News Now. This is our post-UFC 154 show, and we still have more interviews to get to and more fights to break down, so you don't want to miss any of it. You're watching the special post-UFC 154 edition of Fight News Now, where we're recapping all the fights and bringing you tons of post-fight interviews. Now, lightweight John Makdessi defeated Sam Stout by decision, and he is at the Bell Center, where John Pollock got a chance to catch up with him after his win.
John Makdessi here with us, victorious over Sam Stout, earning a unanimous decision victory. John, a huge victory for you, your biggest victory in the 155-pound division in the UFC. Tell us about kind of the strategy against Sam. In his last fight, we saw him really evolve kind of with more of a wrestling game plan, as well as his striking, which has always been his bread and butter. But tonight, was it kind of the Sam Stout you expected?
I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I do obviously, you know, I'm a professional fighter, and my goal is to try to be well-rounded, you know, and I train very hard in my wrestling, my grappling, my striking. It's just, you know, at the end of the day, for me, it's like I'm a striker in my heart, you know. I can wrestle every day, and I'll always strike, you know what I mean? It's like second nature to me. I love striking. I love to give a show, and, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know, you know, you go, you know, I was focusing on the process, and my game plan is a lot of movement and just counter, and that's what I was doing. And, you know, if I just didn't feel like I had to take him down. He was desperate. I saw him rushing me, and I just played it smart, you know.
When you were able to stuff those takedowns, you went for 3 during the fight. After the first one, did you find that he might have been giving up on that wrestling? It seemed to affect him, I think, mentally, the fact that he wasn't able to take you down.
Well, I was just focusing on my footwork. I kept on, like my Anjos, my kickboxing coach. You know, I just kept reminding me to look at his chest, and when I was looking at his chest, you know, when you look at his chest, I see everything coming. And so I just focused on his chest, focused on his feet, on his footwork, and every time he would step in, I would step out, just to make sure I had enough range to counter his striking and to throw a jab. And I was very fortunate to see everything, all his takedowns coming at me, and I was working a lot of my wrestling, and my reflexes were at point, and I'm very fortunate and very lucky to be victorious.
We know you had the problems with the weight cut for Anthony and Jaquani. How did the cut go this time around? You obviously made weight. Did it go much better this time in terms of a relatively easy cut?
I mean, at the end of the day, like we spoke about the other time when it came to choice, if I'm not assuming, like I said, I made a lot of mistakes in the past. Martial arts teaches you teaches you a lot. You know, it's a journey of life, and I just had the wrong team behind me. I was just listening to anybody, and I didn't have a proper dietitianist, and I wasn't training properly, and whatever. I learned from my mistakes. I'm just very fortunate to have a good team behind me now. I have a proper dietitianist who's giving me the support. I have a great family, I have a great team, and I'm just very fortunate to everything went well this time.
Well, congratulations. A great victory over Sam Stout. We wish you all the best moving forward, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So Makdessi and Stout, the only Canadians to face each other at UFC 154. And back over to John and Robin. You guys know both these fighters pretty well. Did anything surprise you in this match?
Yeah, what surprised me the most is that Sam Stout seemed very rushed in this fight. There was a number of times it seems like he could have tried to set up the takedown, but he was more concerned with, I think, putting on a fight that a lot of people expected, 2 of these guys going toe-to-toe opposed to getting the victory. But I can't say that I'm disappointed. I think in the grand scheme of things, this fight played out perfectly because Sam Stout's got a lot of fans. He's not going anywhere, that even though he lost this fight, and John Makdessi desperately needed a victory to get himself moving in the right direction. So I think, and we got a great fight. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, kind of everybody wins, everybody but Sam Stout. I mean, in the end, you lose a fight, and that's not what you set out to do. But, it really was a beautiful fight, and it was a good, clean win for Makdessi. This isn't there was something wrong with Sam or didn't perform well. John Makdessi went in with a great game plan that involved a ton of movement, showing a lot of different looks and beautiful head movement to invite Sam, who did start out attacking like a bully. Sam walked in with the belief that I am the better striker and I'm going to show it right now. And Makdessi played, normally he's the bull, well, he played the matador tonight. He slipped and he moved and he landed, and it was really a beautiful performance. Sam did what Sam does, and he is one of the best, and we'll always love him. But John Makdessi, clean win.
John Makdessi, lots of angles, but I think his weapon of choice tonight was that jab. Very pinpoint accurate. Tagged Sam Stout constantly, and I think that set the pace for him. He was able to do a lot of things, a lot of damage, and really score in the judge's mind, and that's why he walks away the victor in this fight. And John Makdessi is a consummate martial artist. We heard him. He works on his wrestling skills. He works on his jiu-jitsu game, but he's constantly improving. And the most important thing for him is he wants to showcase his stand-up skills, his Shotokan karate skills, and he wants to win with his hands.
Yeah, and he really did, and it was a beautiful job, slip and counter. Sarah, really, I think for Canadian fans, that was fight of the night.
Absolutely. I mean, you're cheering for either side. Who do you go for, right? So, fantastic. All right, thanks, guys. We are not done here yet on Fight News Now, our special UFC 154 edition. There are still more fights to break down and a few more interviews from the city of Montreal. Welcome back to Fight News Now. A huge night of fights at UFC 154, and one of the Canadians to get a W, Antonio Carvalho, a split decision over Rodrigo Dam. And we have John Pollock, who caught up with Carvalho at the Bell Center right here.
We're here backstage at the Bell Center with a victorious Antonio Carvalho, who does not seem to feel like a victor, but you had your arm raised nonetheless, Antonio. A victory here over Rodrigo Dam, someone that stylistically a very, very tough opponent. We saw him, a guy that got his real big break, at least on a national basis, in the Ultimate Fighter, coming off that big submission victory back in June. But you're not feeling great about this victory.
Yeah, I didn't execute, the stuff that we had worked on in the gym, basically, and it's not that I didn't trust my team or my coaches. It just wasn't happening. So it didn't happen tonight, and I think that's why I'm not too happy. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm probably gonna go home and go, okay, I got this one. That could have been worse. I mean, it could have went the other way, and I would have been even worse. So I like I said, I'm still happy with the W, but I'm not happy with the performance. And
you had the leg kicks really going your way in that opening round, doing a lot of visual damage that we could see watching back here. In terms of that game strategy, it was obviously seemed that both of you were very tentative in the early part of the round, but you were scoring with those leg kicks.
Yeah, I mean, there were certain things that I was being effective with, and I felt the leg kicks was certainly one of them. My timing was just better than his, and I caught him with some really solid ones that sort of kept him at bay. I was just upset that I couldn't get my hands going. I wanted to get my lead side going a little bit to set up my right, and I couldn't even get that. And my angling was off. My footwork wasn't there, and it just, again, I went back to being the old stiff Antonio again that showed up in the past. And it just, it's very, very difficult to walk out of that one knowing that I just probably could have done more,
You seem very frustrated at times, especially when the mouthguard fell out. Did you feel like that was kind of you had some momentum going there when that happened, or was it just an overall frustration that you were having?
I was frustrated because, I mean, just when I started to so there were moments where I felt like I was coming forward and I was doing good, and then I just let that momentum go. And
well, I want to end this here on a positive note because here at Fight Network in Canada, we've never been able to see Antonio Carvalho and our editor, Sean McCormick, who we're hoping can come into the shot here, in the same place at one time. These two men, they are separate people. He especially shaved this just for you. Antonio Carvalho Jr. here, who will be cutting this video. So, Antonio, you had a big fan here in Sean McCormick. So, congratulations, Antonio. A victory here in Montreal.
Thanks, guys.
Oh, that is so awesome. Our editor, Sean McCormick, who you just saw there, looks so much like Antonio Carvalho. That was amazing. I think that just made the night for me. Anyways, Carvalho getting the split decision over Rodrigo Dam. And we take it back to our panel. Guys, do you see the similarity there? First
it's like the Pokeroo.
No, this is like the bizarro Carvalho. That one where you look in the mirror and it's all scarred up and weird looking.
So Carvalho said he didn't like his performance tonight. How do you guys rate it?
Well, number one, I think we were talking about it. He just simply did not use his jab to set up other punches. We've seen Tony in the past be very fluid with his hands, use his strikes very effectively. He just seemed very flat in this fight. A couple of high points, a couple of scrambles, jiu-jitsu-wise or grappling-wise. That was some excitement, but unfortunately it didn't go anywhere. And I just think he didn't get a chance to really exploit Rodrigo Dam, especially after brutalizing his leg as much as he did.
Yeah, it's really interesting because Tony is so incredibly skilled, and we saw him knock out Juan Barrentes on his rise to the UFC, just slick and fluid in this beautiful hook, and in his last fight was so beautiful on the feet. And he's had these ones, like he mentioned, being a little stiff in between. But, if I'm talking to Antonio, if I was looking at him, Antonio, you got to be really happy when you can go in and re-examine your own performance and not feel good about it, but get out with a beautiful win, show your skill and show your heart, be proud of that, and go back to the gym, and you keep rising. I thought he did good.
Yes, that is the most important thing, is to walk away the victor. We know that he's a martial artist. He's a jiu-jitsu guy, he's a boxing guy. I mean, he's a well-rounded mixed martial artist who continues to try to evolve his skills. He's just going to go back to the drawing board, see what worked, see what didn't work, talk to Justin, talk to Monkey, talk to all of his coaches, and re-examine what he needs to do to be more successful.
And he's on a journey. This guy's on a journey, and he learns every time. You got to be a fan of this guy.
Did you say talk to Monkey?
Yeah, talk to Monkey.
One of his guys, a key guy in his camp.
Okay, that's awesome. You guys are great. Stay with us here on Fight Network. Don't change the channel. There is still more UFC 154 to cover, and we've got it all coming up after this quick break on Fight News Now, the post-UFC 154 edition. You're watching Fight News Now, our UFC 154 post-fight edition, and what a night of fights it was, and an incredible comeback from George St-Pierre. So let's hear what our MMA panel thought of the card, and guys, overall, was this a success?
It was. I mean, unfortunately, not a lot of the Canadians performed to the best of their abilities, but George St-Pierre put on a career-defining performance because he was, you know, this was not Dan Hardy. This was not an undersized Matt Serra or an aging Matt Hughes. This was a Carlos Condit on his A game, the former WEC welterweight and UFC interim champion, a very viable opponent for George St-Pierre, and he took this guy down. He brutalized him. He stood when he needed to. He really looked absolutely sensational in this victory. He deserves to be considered the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world because that welterweight division is a deep one.
Yes, it is. And there is something absolutely special when you get a chance to see Elvis Presley sing, or you get a chance to see Steve Jobs do his thing, or Tiger Woods hit that ball. And seeing George St-Pierre tonight was really that level of performance. This guy was able to do what he does, show all kinds of drive, and show what a special athlete he was, especially because Condit is such a viable contender, so tough and so gritty and so good. It was a beautiful thing to behold. And, you know, he's going to be a scary guy for as long as he wants to fight.
One of my criticisms of this card was the matchup between Ivan Menjivar and Gashimov. Menjivar getting that first-round submission victory. It ended up being submission of the night. But the fact is, Gashimov, making his UFC debut, was way over his head. He was facing a guy who has all the talent in the world and so much experience. Ivan Menjivar, I believe, could really challenge for the UFC bantamweight title on any given day. This guy is that talented. But overall, it was a great card, especially when the main eventers deliver the fight of the night. And George St-Pierre proves that he is still one of the best in the world.
Well, and the crowd was standing up before the fight was even over. So when that happens, it's like, bam, you know you got a solid fight, and I know Dana White was happy with that, of course, right? Okay, thanks for everything you have recapped, guys. And remember, earlier we brought you the post-fight press conference. We had tons of interviews with John Pollock at the Bell Center in Montreal. So thanks so much for joining us here. We loved UFC 154, and of course, there's always more fighting to come. So again, thanks for joining us.